The victory was nothing more than a hollow triumph. Within hours of the match, WCW officials realized the severity of what had happened. They quickly reversed the title change, stripping Rude of the championship. He had literally broken his neck to win. Their official storyline explanation was that Rude had illegally used the title belt as a weapon during the match. This was a convenient narrative designed to cover up the medical emergency and forced retirement that everyone knew was coming. The real story was much darker. Rick Rude left WCW in bitter fashion. His career ended at the worst possible moment. He was 35 years old, an age when most wrestlers were still considered to be in their prime. He had just signed the most lucrative contract of his career and was positioned for a major championship run. Instead, he found himself forced into early retirement with a permanently damaged spine. The aftermath revealed the ugly truth that lay beneath wrestling's carefully scripted surface. The industry that had made Rick Rude a star was quick to abandon him when he could no longer perform. There was no safety net, no long-term disability plan, no real concern for his well-being beyond the immediate legal liability. The public narrative surrounding the incident became a web of contradictions and carefully managed public relations. Sting, the man whose dive had caused the injury, worked hard to control the story. In a 1999 interview with the Miami Herald, Sting publicly maintained that he and Rude had remained friends throughout the ordeal. He claimed that when Rude returned to WCW in 1997, he walked right up to him and shook his hand without any animosity. Sting insisted they were friends until the day Rude died. But this polished public statement stood in stark contrast to the emotional reality that was playing out behind the scenes. Rude's widow, Michelle Rude, painted a completely different picture of her husband's state of mind following the injury. She revealed that the end of his wrestling career had just killed him emotionally. The injury had taken away the thing that gave his life meaning and purpose. Multiple sources within the wrestling industry reported that Rude was intensely bitter towards Sting for not better protecting him during that fatal dive. The feeling was that Sting had been careless, that he had ignored the obvious dangers of the ring setup and the specific warnings he had reportedly received before the match. The real tension between the two men became impossible to hide when legal action was filed. Rude had initiated a lawsuit against Sting and WCW over the injury and the circumstances surrounding it. This wasn't just about money, it was about accountability and justice for a career that had been needlessly ended. Sting himself eventually acknowledged the immense stress he felt from being sued by an unnamed wrestler. While he never mentioned Rude by name in interviews, it was obvious to everyone in the wrestling business who he was referring to. The lawsuit created a cloud of tension that hung over both men for years. The most dramatic account of their conflict came from former WCW wrestler Buff Bagwell. In a story he shared on his YouTube channel, Bagwell claimed that the animosity between Rude and the Sting had escalated to a dangerous level. According to Bagwell, Rude had confronted Sting on the side of a road before a court hearing related to the lawsuit. In Bagwell's telling, Rude allegedly had a gun in his hand when he approached Sting's horrible end. That's the only way to describe the final night of Ravishing Rick Rude's career. The match that ended Ravishing Rick Rude's in-ring career wasn't just another wrestling contest. It was the beginning of a tragic spiral that would destroy a legend. May 1st, 1994. Wrestling Dontaku in Fukuoka, Japan. Rick Rude was at the top of his game. 35 years old in his second year of the most lucrative contract of his career. He was challenging Sting for the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship. The big gold belt was on the line. This was supposed to be Rude's crowning moment on the international stage. But the stage itself was fatally flawed. The wrestling ring sat on a raised platform. Around the ringside area was a lower elevated board. This design created a dangerous hazard. Some reports say Rude had specifically warned Sting about diving to the outside. He knew the setup was risky. Sting didn't listen. Or maybe he forgot in the heat of battle. The decisive moment came when Sting executed a running over the top rope dive to the outside. A springboard plancha that looked spectacular. Rude caught his opponent perfectly, showing his incredible strength and ring awareness. But in catching Sting, physics took over. Rude fell backward. His head and neck folded violently under his body as he crashed onto the unforgiving edge of that elevated platform. The impact was devastating. His C4 and C5 vertebrae were blown out. In medical terms, this type of injury can cause quadriplegia or death. The established protocol demands immediate, complete immobilization of the cervical spine. Rick Rude did the exact opposite. Despite suffering what should have been a career-ending, possibly life-ending injury, he didn't stop the match. He was in tremendous pain, but he continued wrestling. He took multiple back bumps on the entrance ramp. He even executed a high-impact diving knee drop to secure the victory and win the championship. This wasn't heroic. It was the beginning of his downfall. His refusal to acknowledge the severity of his condition made everything worse. The show must go on mentality that wrestling drilled into performers had just cost Rude his future. The victory was short-lived. WCW quickly reversed the title change. Their official storyline explanation was that Rude had illegally used the title belt as a weapon. In reality, they were covering up a medical emergency and forced retirement. Rick Rude left WCW in bitter fashion. His in-ring career was over at an age when most wrestlers were still in their prime. The aftermath revealed the ugly truth beneath wrestling's scripted surface. Sting publicly maintained that he and Rude remained friends. In a 1999 interview, Sting claimed Rude walked right up to him and shook his hand when he returned to WCW in 1997. He insisted they were friends until the day Rude died. But Rude's widow, Michelle, painted a different picture. She said the injury just killed him emotionally. He was devastated that he couldn't perform anymore. Multiple sources reported that Rude was bitter towards Sting for not better protecting him during that dive. The real tension became clear through a pending lawsuit. Rude had filed legal action against Sting and WCW over the injury. Sting himself acknowledged the immense stress of being sued by an unnamed wrestler, obviously referring to Rude. Former WCW wrestler Buff Bagwell shared the most dramatic account of their conflict. According to Bagwell, Rude confronted Sting on the side of a road. Rude allegedly had a gun in his hand and told Sting he hoped he would do the right thing at the upcoming court hearing. Bagwell claimed Sting was petrified of Rude and deeply upset about having to tell the truth in court because the truth wasn't good for Rick. Whether this confrontation actually happened or was exaggerated doesn't matter. It shows the profound animosity simmering beneath wrestling's fake friendships. Sting's public statements were careful public relations moves. Rude's bitterness was raw human emotion from a man who lost everything in one moment. The injury created a cruel financial trap that made Rude's situation even worse. Like many top wrestlers in the 1990s, Rude had secured a career-ending disability insurance policy with Lloyd's of London. These policies provided substantial payouts if an injury prevented a wrestler from continuing their career. After his injury in Japan, Rude collected on his policy. He received a significant lump sum that provided financial security for his family. But this safety net became a prison. The terms of such policies legally barred him from returning to the ring. If he wrestled again, he would have to pay back the full amount of the claim. For a man whose entire identity was wrapped up in wrestling, this financial security became torture. As the wrestling industry experienced a boom during the Monday Night War between WCW and WWF, Rude desperately wanted to be back in the ring. The money that secured his future was now the barrier preventing him from reclaiming his passion. In the late 1990s, he approached WCW President Eric Bischoff about returning to active competition. Rude's proposed solution was for WCW to pay off the $300,000 to $400,000 he owed to the insurance company as part of a new contract. Bischoff rejected the request. He explained that a mid-carder with a permanent back injury wasn't worth $700,000 plus to WCW. This rejection soured the relationship between the two men. Rude was reduced to begging for a chance to buy his way back into the business that had defined his life. The psychological trap was complete. The insurance money that protected him became his primary enemy. For professional wrestlers of Rude's caliber, their job isn't just a livelihood. It's fundamental to their self-worth. The loss of that identity had devastating long-term consequences that went far beyond the initial physical trauma. Despite being barred from wrestling, Rude's charisma and presence kept him valuable to the industry. He reinvented himself as a non-wrestling performer and manager. In ECW, he became an advisor to Shane Douglas and worked as a commentator. His wit and intensity elevated the product even without taking bumps. In the WWF, he was an integral part of the early D-Generation X stable. He served as their insurance policy, bringing swagger and legitimacy to the rebellious faction. His most iconic post-injury moment came during the height of the Monday Night Wars. On November 17, 1997, Rude made history by appearing on both WWF's Raw's War and WCW's Monday Nitro on the same night. Raw was taped earlier, and Nitro was live. This unprecedented move was a direct result of his anger over the Montreal Screwjob at the previous night's Survivor Series. The double appearance demonstrated his business savvy and value in the cutthroat environment of the time. He continued his non-wrestling roles in WCW, primarily as a manager for the NWO, until his departure in spring 1999. But success outside the ring never filled the void inside Rick Rude. He remained tormented by his inability to perform. The roles he took were consolation prizes compared to what he really wanted. His bitterness toward the injury, toward Sting, toward the insurance trap, festered for years. The tragic conclusion came on April 20th, 1999. Rick Rude was found unconscious at his home in Atlanta. He died at age 40 from a heart attack caused by a drug overdose. The timing makes his death even more heartbreaking. Reports indicate he was actively training for a return to the ring at the time of his death. His death has a specific medical cause, but it's directly linked to the emotional and physical fallout from his career-ending injury 5 years earlier. His wife's words ring true. The end of his career just killed him emotionally. The loss of his identity as a performer initiated a chain of events that culminated in his early death. The pressure to regain a physique and ring capability lost due to severe spinal injury would have required a rigorous and dangerous regimen. The injury in 1994 was the starting point for a psychological and physical downward spiral. Substance abuse and health issues ultimately took his life. Rick Rude's final match wasn't just the end of a career. It was the first domino in a tragic sequence that destroyed a legend. The injury didn't just take his body. It initiated a cascade of emotional and physical decline that ended with his death at 40. He was a man defined by his profession, and the loss of that identity was a wound that never healed. The financial trap of his insurance policy made everything worse. The bitterness towards Sting poisoned his relationships. The desperate attempts to return to wrestling consumed his final years. Rude's story serves as a stark reminder of the unseen costs of professional wrestling. The line between performance and reality can be fatally blurred. His legacy isn't just his charismatic heel work or revolutionary presence. It's also a cautionary tale about what happens when the business takes everything from a performer. The match that ended Ravishing Rick Rude's in-ring career was more than an accident. It was the beginning of a 5-year decline that ended with his death. A performer who refused to quit was ultimately destroyed by the very business he loved. In the end, wrestling didn't just end his career, it ended his life.